So we're now live. Okay, Mayor, you want to go ahead and explain? Introduce.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I wanted to thank you, Council President and members of Council, for allowing us to make this presentation. I know that Council President and Vice President have requested for us to give you a report on the CDBG and ESG funding. Gary Kirkmeyer and his team has prepared, working with members of the community, especially with the ESG funding, preliminary plan that we want to go over with Council. It definitely considers many of the different items that Council have raised as matters of concern. So I'm going to turn it over to him to give a presentation, and then we can answer any questions that you may have. And we can also talk about the process, because there is a 5-day comment period that the public will have to respond. And we will release that for the public to also be able to look at this and respond. After we do that, we will have to then get a final approval from HUD. I want you to know that we have not received any dollars in-house yet, as far as the last time I spoke to the commissioner about this. And we're waiting for, for our plans and everything to be approved, and therefore to be able to distribute dollars and funds. But wanted to make sure that Council understood or saw the report and could comment prior to releasing it to the public for comment. So Gary, if you want to take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council. We really appreciate the short notice in the meeting, the opportunity to tell you what we've done to date. I think I have to start by thanking and appreciating and recognizing the hard work the staff and their partners in the community have put forth the last couple of weeks. This has not been an easy process by any stretch of the imagination. There's been little, bits and pieces of information along the way that had to guide us and steer us towards developing a plan. So people have put in a lot of time and energy, and I need to recognize that. So the plan that we're going to go through today, we're extremely supportive and proud of. We believe that it addresses direct access to our residents and our businesses, especially our small businesses that are in need and mostly impacted by the pandemic. Before I get to I'm going to go through a couple of the highlights. And then we're going to turn it over to staff and go through each of the activities, starting with CDBG. But before I do that, I just want to, circle back to the email that went out and all the documents that you received. They're inclusive of an overview summary of the CDBG process, which includes at the bottom of that document the timeline that we're working under right now. We can go through that before we're done here. You've got the CDBG draft work plan. You've got the ESG summary document that talks about the engagement part of the process with our outside providers. And then you have the ESG work plan, and you have the HAPWA work plan. So some of the highlights include, our business emergency retention grant. We're over 200 now. I think last count yesterday, we're at like 209. So that's been of tremendous need, and people are very appreciative of the work that Dana, Thad, and their teams have done to facilitate those grants in a really efficient process manner. So the grant, if people give us everything that they're due to give us, we can turn that over to a check within a few days. And that's remarkable for a new process. We've got a lot of dedicated effort to eviction prevention, both in the form of rental assistance and in the form of legal assistance. We've got a lot of dedicated effort to homelessness prevention. We've got some things in here that are new to our environment in terms of rehab grants for landlords that we'll talk about. And then Commissioner Lyman Torres will talk a lot more about the digital divide issue that we're trying to address here and really try to help our resident children that are really at a disadvantage, certainly under the current situation with having to do schoolwork from afar. So we're going to start with CDBG. I'm going to try to share my screen to bring it up. And I'm going to turn it over initially to Dana to cover the business development topics. Dana.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Appreciate your your comments, and thank you to all of council for joining in with us. As Gary mentioned, we have two challenges here that we have really worked very hard on over the last several weeks. One is the business emergency retention grants. Although they are relatively small, they are grants that are extremely important to helping businesses stay in business during this time. So what we're proposing is additional funding for those businesses. Currently, the average is about $2,000 per applicant. We're proposing a maximum grant of $3,000 per applicant. And by using CDBG funds, we'll be able to make far more of these grants and keep these businesses in operation. These funds will be primarily working capital grants. So they'll be able to use the grants for any types of business expenses, rent, utilities, salaries, and so on. So we're really requiring just that they retain workers who are currently working. Generally speaking, when we offer funds, it's for job creation, but really we understand right now the focus is retention. So we're really working very, very hard to make that happen. And so that will be a big piece of this. The next piece that you see below that is assistance for food establishments. And that's really helping restaurants. We know that restaurants are really challenged right now because of the inability to have folks inside. So we want to help those restaurants provide meals with additional funding. And if we can't, as you see in the second bullet, if we're not able to make that happen within the CDBG requirements, then those funds will be added to the business emergency retention grants. We did have a good meeting with HUD on Friday, and we do think that this will be possible, but we still have some details to finish.
So thanks, Dana.
Can I ask a quick question, or do we want to hold off for questions till the end?
We don't have a preference.
Why don't you go through it right quick and then we can come back.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a lot to cover between the three charts. Carol, is your audio working? Carol was having an audio problem before.
It should be working. Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay,
Yes.
very good. All right, so in housing, the first thing that's listed is eviction prevention. And this is actually rental assistance to landlords on behalf of tenants. And what is unique about the CDBG dollars is that you can actually service a higher income household. Typically, ESG dollars are used for households under 30%. With the new dollars, it goes up to 50%, but CDBG dollars can allow you to actually assist households up to 80. So we're looking with these dollars to really be able to fill the gap for some of our higher income households that may need that type of assistance as well. As far as the second, eviction prevention, it speaks to the legal assistance that's needed. We currently have in place, agreements with Legal Aid Society that actually represents individuals at housing court. And we do believe that with the dollars, this will be helpful in really helping the increased numbers that we're expecting to actually be going through eviction court. The next one is homeless prevention. One of the things that we do know and we already assist is basically a informational line for landlords and tenants, for that matter, to call so that they can get the necessary information that they need and be dispersed to the resources that are available. The next is aging in place. With aging in place, one of the things that is happening after reaching out to our partners is that the seniors, they are needing to be connected with services. And one in particular is transportation, as well as bringing actually resources into them. And so that has been an express need by our partners, and that's something that we're looking to do with the CDBG dollars. Lastly is foreclosure prevention. And we know that because individuals and households may have lost income, we want to make sure that we're helping them save their homes and stay in place with this mortgage default counseling assistance to actually work with lending institutions. So everything that we are proposing are things that we are able to move pretty quickly, because there are, some of our partners that already have some of these activities already in place. It's a matter of being able to expand them.
All right, thanks, Carol. So I'll cover the next two items. I mentioned this briefly before, the landlord rehab grant program we're trying to establish. Some of you may be aware of this. Recently, there was a request on the part of landlords, and we used the email depository list we had from the Landlord Summit to shout out a message to say, do you have vacant units? If so, we have a lot of people in need of housing. And to date, I think as of Friday, they had over 60 responses from landlords to help with that housing placement. And these were, homelessness prevention types of needs. So that was really an eye opener in terms of, recognizing where we might be able to partner. We're trying to partner in a lot of these things to help both tenants and landlords. Rental assistance will help both populations. This grant is targeted for vacant unit reutilization. So if you have a vacant unit and you have some spruce up costs associated with that, definitely going to be under $2,000 max. And then, to get that unit into affordable housing for somebody that's in need will continue to be of tremendous value. So that's the hypothetical right now. It's still in the construction stages of developing it, but that's what we're thinking. EAP is basically our ERP program. We had to change the acronym for ERP because you can't really do repair, you can't do maintenance work with CDBG funding. So, recognizing that we have, and as much as we don't want to duplicate the word EAP, emergency assistance program is what that is transitioning to. So that is just increasing our current emergency assistance program that's formerly known as ERP. Now I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Lyman Torres to cover the digital divide subject.
Good afternoon. So we have been a part of a community-wide systems integration work group that has been working to look at all aspects of the crisis and how it's impacting residents in our community. And this work group has been co-led by Congressman Morelli and Regent Norwood. And one of the major pieces that has come out is the COVID-19 crisis has certainly magnified the reliance for families to use technology to access benefits, medical care, employment, and has now become the only source for education. And we're in a situation where families with multiple small children are faced with using a single household cell phone for all of those needs, plus those educational needs. And many families have plans based on minutes as well. So the public-private group, this systems integration group, has really been working to think of ways that there could be a public-private funding partnership to work on reducing that need. RCSD has been able to deploy hardware for distance learning to families in grades 6 through 12, but have not been able to deploy resources in any of the lower grades. And so this team has been working to try to identify how a public-private partnership can work grade level by grade level to try to influence this hardware disparity more than anything else, because there have been other ways to deal with connectivity disparity. So at this point, we're focused on the hardware itself for access and trying to balance this equity issue there.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. And then I'll cover these last two items and then we'll shift right over to ESG and Carol will take care of those. So this infrastructure item we have here, this $300,000 listed under DES, is in the event that we have to do a build out for additional space related to COVID-19 needs. We're putting a contingency in this line to say if that doesn't prove to be necessary within 30 days of the plan adoption, then that $300,000 is going to revert to the digital divide effort. We don't anticipate needing that right now, but we have to put something in there as a contingency just in the event that something changes between now and 30 days from now. And then, CDBG, all the federal funding, ESG and CDBG do allow for up to 10% admin costs. These are definitely going to put additional stresses on staff in terms of our deployment of staff. We're certainly going to have more people involved, and more people involved in longer hours means we're going to, be able to bill for that. So we're not getting additional staff to do it. We're not creating new hours to do it. So there's some form of relief in terms of, the city's financial position as a result of that. So let me stop sharing this one so that I can share the ESG. And then Carol, do you want to cover this?
Carol, you're on mute if you are talking. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Okay. As far as, the ESG, one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure, which we did, was reach out to the community to get an idea of what the highest priorities were for the funding. And really the four highest priorities were homelessness prevention, staffing, the assistance provided to the homeless with hotel rooms and support services. Those were the things that came up as far as highest. What you see on the chart is homelessness prevention, which really prevents, hopefully, people from becoming homeless. And that's by providing assistance with rent arrears. And again, this is assistance that will be provided to the landlords on the behalf of tenants, but it is also able to pay for things such as back utility bills that may also prevent people either from moving into a unit or keep them from remaining in a stable housing unit. Emergency shelter operations, one of the things that we're observing is that a lot of the shelter staff, they're having not only to provide staffing to the shelters that they currently operate, but in order to decompress, they've had to place individuals in shelters, and staff are needing to be in the shelters to also provide assistance. As well as during this time, hazard pay has come into play. And so that's something that the COVID or CARES Act definitely allows for, to pay staff extra if they're in certain positions. Coordinated entry is really our overall activity as far as where everyone comes in to be prioritized for housing, which is very, very important to the overall homeless system. Rapid rehousing is one of the activities that we want to make sure gets included, because once individuals have moved into, say, the hotels, ideally what we would want is for them not to remain, or should they go back or return to hotels, but ideally be moving into permanent housing. And these type of dollars would allow for that to occur. And of course, street outreach, always interested in making sure that we are reaching out to the most vulnerable, and those are those that may be on the outside.
All right,
So,
thanks.
yeah, go ahead.
You good, Carol? All right, thanks. Let me bring up the HAPA and then we can get the question. There you go.
Okay, so HOPWA, we are with the new dollars, the additional dollars that are being provided. This is for housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, and we are continuing with or looking to continue 3 activities: the long-term tenant-based assistance, short-term assistance, and also permanent housing. These are really the same activities. There really is not much difference except for in the permanent housing piece, where there is dollars that are able to be made available for people assessing or accessing rather medical supplies and medical activities. So that's something that is a little different with these dollars, and we have put in some funding for that.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I know that was kind of quick review, but I guess we'll open it up now for questions.
Okay, Councilmember Gruber, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a couple. I'll try not to hog the mic though. In terms of small business loans, the first thing that was mentioned, I'm wondering, is there a way, as we all know, the payroll protection program was not really doled out in a very equal way by the federal government. Is there a way to ensure that the folks that we serve are specifically folks who did not get PPP?
We actually, we're under, the guidance of HUD. We have to solicit that question and answer. So, we'll be trying to get that information. Even though we believe that they might be different needs, we can't duplicate effort. That's the one thing the federal government keeps saying in all these programs: you can't duplicate effort. And in the CDBG funding, they not only say that, but they say if there's other funding sources, they have to be used first. So we're very aware of that, and we are embedding that into the process. But all we're going to do is solicit. We're not going to be able to validate. It's almost going to be an honor system thing, because the speed of the process by which we're trying to provide assistance, I don't think will lend us to being able to be highly regulatory there. But we're definitely going to try to regulate that.
Yeah, it would be nice to do something. It feels to me like, and of course, it's no one's fault here, but it seems to me like the PPP has been the rich get richer and the poor get poorer type of situation in terms of who actually gets dollars. And to the extent that we can be the opposite here, I think would be great. Even, and if we can't formally do it, if we could at least kind of encourage and move that way, that would be wonderful. To make sure I don't hog the mic, I just want to add 2 other things. One, when it comes to homelessness, I think that this crisis has shown very clearly how unprepared Peace Village was to be able to handle it. And I would make the argument that either the city should invest some dollars into Peace Village so that we don't go through this again. Or if the decision is not to, there ought to be a conversation about not having a Peace Village. But to me, it seems like this is a fairly critical juncture to make a decision like that, and not a conversation we have to have now. But that's something that I think we really ought to think about. The last thing I would just ask for is some clarity on the digital divide stuff and how it pertains to the announcement with Greenlight.
So I'll jump in here for just a moment to address a couple of things. The first, I think that it would be very lucrative if Commissioner Kirkmeyer was able to share with council the list of businesses that have taken advantage of the grants thus far. We have about, I believe, 199 businesses that have gone through and our first round of grants, and they're from many different sectors. And I think that that would be very important for you all to know and see. I'm sure that he that's a list that he already has prepared, and it can be helpful in this process as we go forward to make sure that the right businesses is receiving the right results, or, as he was saying, not duplicate effort. As it pertains to Peace Village, there's a couple, to go back to how Peace Village got started. We would need to also have a sideline on what that investment you're talking about looks like. Because the people that live there and who have been, as you know, for over 40 years, we have shifted our chronically homeless from place to place, from location to location. First, they were in a Civic Center garage, then they went to the Washington Square Park, and then they left Washington Square Park and went over to the Spectrum property. They were evicted from there, and we decided that if we were going to have the significant population that do not want housing, and that's what they said to us. They did not want to live in traditional housing, follow traditional rules. They wanted to just have a place where they could be without being regulated by, by government in many ways, and we were able to do that. We would need to talk to the residents of Peace Village on how to act to respect their wishes, but also, support the board. And I'm not saying that there aren't any challenges there, but I just think that we have to be respectful of the residents that live there and what their wishes are and were during the time that we established a place that they could live in the way that they wanted to live.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I would just say I agree with you. I think you and I are philosophically aligned on this. I think that in terms of what we're experiencing right now, I think with a public health crisis, we need to not only ask the residents, but also ask the providers. And I would say the investment that would need to be made there specifically relates to water. There was, I mean, that was the biggest issue, is there's no ability there for people to wash their hands in a time like right now. And obviously safe drinking water and water to be able to perform any basic hygiene. So I think that I would just argue that I think the city at some point is going to need to make that investment if we want Peace Village to exist. And it seems like the ESG dollars might be an opportunity to do that. But again, we don't have to have that conversation right now. It could be something we do offline as well.
Okay, definitely. And then I'll turn it over for the last question for Carol to answer. If you want to repeat that question, I'm pretty sure, because I talked, she probably forgot.
Yeah,
I just wanted to, it might actually be for Commissioner Lyman Torres.
It's sort of the Commissioner Lyman Torres.
I just wanted a little more information on the funding for the digital divide, and specifically how it relates to the Greenland announcement that came out last week.
So this particular item does not relate to the green light announcement last week. That was more of a, an infrastructure regarding access. This specific item is talking about the hardware that has been identified to be a major gap for our residents, in particular residents who have families with multiple children, that there's a hardware issue. So that's what this is specifically dealing with. And again, through the systems integration digital divide work group, we've been working with all the community-based organizations, United Way, Rochester Area Community Foundation, to try to generate the resources that we need to be able to ease the issue with the hardware piece, because there have been other efforts that have supported the access piece.
Okay, question then. So, okay, so you're buying laptops for them, I guess, is what you're doing?
Yeah,
like that?
Chromebooks.
And I guess my other question, comment, a request for clarification. Something tells me that our local businesses are going to complete your process much quicker than they would complete the federal government process. It's my hope that we wouldn't do anything that would preclude anyone from applying for both programs. I understand that there's this desire to not duplicate efforts, but who knows when that federal check is going to show up. But from the sound of what you guys are doing, you work in a timely manner, and that's going to happen in a week. So whatever process we're putting in place, I would just ask that we follow the rules, but we leave an opportunity for local businesses to pursue every opportunity that is available to them.
Can I add to that, please?
Vice President Lightfoot,
Thank you,
I want
Madam
to
President. I'm sorry, go ahead.
recognize Councilmember Lupien, who requested to make a
Yes,
comment.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, I actually have two questions. One is on the small business grant about retaining employees. Are they expected to retain the employees during the crisis, or is this about staffing back up when this is over?
Councilmember Lupien, ideally, we're hoping that these folks will be able to continue working during the crisis. But in the event that someone is having employees and would be not bringing them back after the crisis, then we would want to encourage them, even if they had to be furloughed temporarily, that these employees are brought back. So as long as they can prove that the jobs will be retained, then that would be.
So they don't have to be
just
working.
On the point that Council earlier, I wanted to remind folks that these are grants, not, so these don't have to be back.
So I think what I heard is they don't have to be currently working through the crisis, but that they'll be furloughed and then brought back after.
Yes, they'll have,
Go ahead,
you're having some
Councilor.
audio problems, Dana. So
Yes.
you're coming in and out.
Okay.
We will have an obligation to report to HUD that there's some form of retention. It's not as relative to today as it is, when they get back up and running.
Got it.
Right.
My other question is around the money that the landlords are getting for, I forget what it's called, but basically sprucing up the apartment, vacant units, rehab money. Is there any restrictions on that they rent to lower income folks, or is that?
Yeah, yes, that's the target. We're going to have, a lot of this stuff is still in the infancy stages of perfecting, but the thought is it's going to be for a maximum of a couple $1,000s, probably going to be less. It's going to be for availing a vacant unit to an affordable resident, a resident that's at certain AMI. I don't know if we'll go under 80 or even below that. But yeah, all of those criteria will be developed for sure. That's the target.
Okay. And I guess finally is more like a comment around being able to expand the CDBG, using the CDBG money to cover folks that make up to 80% of AMI in their rent. And I would just say that potentially those folks may have more resources. And I would think that if we focused on maybe 50% and under, that it would go further. But that's just a comment.
So our thought there was ESG is, fully dedicated. I mean, typically, like Carol said, for 30 and under, they're increasing that to 50 and under. But, the widespread impact and problems that we're looking at, we feel need to go beyond that. If statistics prove differently, this is the first round of funding. We believe there's going to be an additional one. We'll be able to sharpen our pencils better on that one, knowing more information as we go.
Thank you.
Vice President Lightfoot.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Just a couple of things. Nice work, though. I do like what I'm seeing. However, I would add to Councilman Patterson's thought, even though I may differ just a bit. The SBA loans, the reason they ran out of money is because they were so easy to sign up for. There was an online form. It was very convenient. So I would hope and offer for consideration that we would, as we begin to dole out our grants, one of the things that I've been hearing from the community is that this packet is very large, thick packet, application packet, which, the process is the process, but it would be helpful if we could figure out a way to make it where you can apply online. Now, of course, when we run out of money, we run out of money. But I think you would broaden the amount of applications that you would have if there was on. You still have people who are very nervous about going outside, very nervous about handling papers, documents, all of those kind of things, even though we know that the CDC says you can't get this thing from mail and documents. But however, you still have people who are very nervous about that. So I think for consideration, if it was a way of making our process an online process, I think that would be something that the community would like, okay? Also, I would like to ask Carol Wheeler, because I heard in her presentation that there were 4 things that were chosen or that keep coming up. Homeless was one of them. I'd like to know how is those 4 things, who's making those decisions? Like where did those 4 come from?
Those 4 things come from? Well, with our partners, we are partnering with the county as well, our partners in being homelessness, anti-displacement. So there are several different organizations that we had been working with, Homeless Services Network, Continuum of Care, and we sent out a survey to all of our partners and providers, and based upon that survey, this is what came back. As far as these 4 items, these were those that had the highest numbers as far as what the need was in the community.
Okay, it's based on a survey. Okay, thank you. And my last piece is a request to be considered for consideration as well. I know the CBG money, potentially grants are available for any businesses who qualify. I heard mentioned that restaurants were ones who were hurting really bad. And I just want to continue to advocate for the appearance enhancement industry, the barbers, beauticians, salons, because I believe they've been more impacted than our restaurants, because a lot of our restaurants can still do takeout. They can still conduct business if they change their business model. The appearance enhancement industry cannot change their model. They cannot service anyone at this time. And I would offer that they are probably one of our largest mom and pop micro businesses within our community. So I would look to make sure that we're marketing to that particular section of our community who is hurting extremely bad right now. Thank you.
Willie, this is Thad. That's in the top 3 of our businesses assisted. Food and beverage, professional, and barbershops, by far the biggest impacts that we've seen. So that's a positive note that we're helping.
Thank you, Thad. I appreciate it. And I trust that.
And we will continue to do so. I know that there is a internal team, and as well as working with Councilmember Patterson, that I'm looking at how we can best serve the businesses in our community, and we're continuously evaluating that and going to be reaching out to you and other barbershops and beauty salons so that we can understand the accurate way to help them as the community starts to reopen businesses and things like that. So definitely on our radar, and we want to make sure that we are covering all bases when we start to not only give out these grants, but also asking different businesses what are their needs and how can the city be of assistance to them as they start to reopen and get back up and running.
Thank you.
So, Carol, you mentioned that the priorities came from work with the providers. How were the consumers included or recognized in the process?
The consumers?
Yeah, people who represent the consumers, like the tenants union and people like that.
So they will be represented in a 5-day comment period. That's the public comment period where all of their views, and not just the tenants union, but landlords and other folks, where they can comment and let us know what their thoughts are. That's the reason why we wanted to first have this meeting with council, and then we will be releasing that information for the 5-day comment period, and the tenants union and other folks will be able to comment then.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councilmember Lupien.
I have 2 more questions, sorry. To follow up with Councilmember Vice President Lightfoot, I know that there's a lot of I guess I don't know how many, but that there are many people in that industry that maybe don't have official businesses and kind of do it on the side. Is there a way that we can address that for folks who maybe, you know, did hair or, you know, whatever, and didn't have like an official business?
I don't think we've been able to navigate to a really, really great extent the very regulated HUD processes to get, to start using CDBG for the business grants. It has to be a business. It has to be an established business. As the mayor spoke to before, I will share with council, our grant applicants to date, what type of businesses we've been experiencing coming through the process, and you'll see, what kind of businesses are reaching out. And I just want to catch up on, because I will not remember these if I don't. There were a couple of questions Councilmember Patterson had asked about, and Councilmember Lightfoot reiterated, how do we not impact negatively businesses' opportunity to get SBA loans? Well, to me, it seems rather simple, is in our conversations with them, is whatever they ask us for, they should not be putting on their SBA application. I mean, it's not, I don't think it has to get any more complicated than that. Their needs are greater than our relief, right? Especially that small retention grant. So I don't envision that being a hurdle for them. We just have to, when we're engaging our customers, make sure they're aware of that and make sure that they tread lightly through those processes. And then
President Scott,
okay.
Yes.
President Scott, Councilmember Ortiz had put a request in the
Yes.
chat that she has some questions. All right, I just
Yeah,
want to
I
make
was
sure you
going to
saw
her
it.
next.
Okay.
I have one more.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Lupian, you had another question.
sorry.
And then
It was-
Councilmember Ortiz.
It's for Commissioner Lyman Torres. With the devices for the students, how are you? How is the city working with RCSD to identify which students already have devices and which students have the need?
Yeah, that's exactly where we're getting the data from. We've been working very closely with RCSD. They know exactly where the need is. They also know from the very small number of people who have stated they don't have a need. So they have all of the detail on that, and they're providing that information.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Great, thank you. So one of my questions is around the eviction prevention, foreclosure, so a couple of them seem to overlap in terms of the type of services. So if we're providing rent assistance and those things, are there a list of, I know Carol, you just said a couple other names, but can we get a list of the providers and the preliminary thought in terms of how much of the 900,000, how much of the other buckets may potentially go to these service providers for their piece of what they're going to provide? Because I'm just trying to understand, how does the overlap happen with some of these buckets? And then the other thing is, in terms of the assistance, a couple of us were talking to some property owners earlier today, and the assistance from the county in terms of the push out of the networking to get themselves on a list of what units are available, and the rent assistance for 2 or 3 months was very helpful, but many of them said, okay, then what happens after the 2 months or the 3 months? And so the question is what we envision the process to actually look like when providing that rental assistance to the landlords directly, to the tenants, what that might look like. And again, I know it's probably a little too early because we're just now starting this, but to get some further clarification in terms of who the service providers are, how much of the pot that we think will go to each, and then what specifically we envision the process looking like for that rental assistance. That would be really helpful when we can get it. And then my last,
I'm sorry, just to answer your first question. So we have service providers, as you know, that are already providing these types of services to the community. So legal aid is already assisting. I think I believe, Gary, you can answer this, but that we have to go out for RFP or RFQ. And so we would be getting information from them. Our goal here is not to reinvent the wheel or give anything a startup type of thing, because of the fact that we want to provide immediate relief to not only our residents, but to those businesses that are receiving it, and without trying to recreate something, to utilize what we already have within the system. And so that will be the goal. But if you want to talk about, Commissioner, the RFP process and how people are going to be selected, I don't believe that dollars have been assigned to each organization as of yet. They would do that through the RFP process. And then we can answer the next question.
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor. So if you look at the timeline when you get a chance, that's the CDBG summary document. You'll see that we are right now, we're in the process of the NOFA, the request for funding application. So that time expires Friday, May 1st. Friday, May 1st is also the day that we intend to make this public and have the 5-day public comment period start. So when you get a chance, if you look at that timeline, you'll get a greater sense for where we are in that process. But yeah, we don't have selected agencies yet, as the mayor alluded to, and certainly it's going to be beneficial, highly beneficial for us to use the expertise and experience that we have in our community right now. We don't see any overlap or duplication in these plans. As we said earlier, ESG covers AMI up to a certain amount, and then CDBG takes it from there, but can go lower. I mean, CDBG doesn't have to be between 50 and 80, it could be below 30. So, we're trying to have a compounding impact on all of our community, who we believe, again, will share some of these needs, but focus most of everything we have to low mod.
Okay, so based
Mayor,
on
can I just add that this has to happen at the May council cycle as well. So once the comment period is over with on Friday, we have a really tight turnaround to get it to council by, let's say, Tuesday. So we'll be working through the weekend with budget and law to get it to them by Wednesday so that they can have it for committee meetings. So it's a really tight turnaround.
Okay, so, and based on your timeline, the first, so Friday, we will know, who will essentially, whom the agencies will be, how much the allocation, because if all this has to come to us that quickly, essentially it looks like we'll know by Friday then.
That's right. Yeah. So we have to, because of the timeline Josanne just mentioned, we have to start to draft items right now. We can't perfect them until after Friday's deadline. So
okay.
Saturday, we will send the perfected council items to Josanne and Tom Worth, and we'll go from there.
So
okay.
Just to be clear, you won't know Friday necessarily unless we want to send something to council ahead of them getting the transmittals.
So I think that what Gary, to just clarify what the commissioner is saying, we're expecting the RFPs to come back to us on Friday. And so once we get the RFPs back and we're able to then put forth the documents into the legislation with the amounts and all of that, then we will send that over to council through the process, and then you will get that law. We will try to get that to you before the council period, and if there needs to be some committee meeting, and if there needs to be some amendments or something like that, then we will do that later. But we have a tight time frame in order to do this, so we want to make sure that we provide you with accurate information.
Okay.
And sorry, I have one last question. One last question that I have, thank you, is also on the work Commissioner Lemon Torres is doing. I think it's great that we're providing assistance for access with the Chromebooks and everything, but are we also, so obviously my kid is in kindergarten, they're not necessarily doing a super structured program for kindergartners per se, but when we give out these Chromebooks and help them, get internet access with the hotspots, is there a way that we are trying to ensure that educational activity is actually occurring with these units? I apologize, I don't know how that part of this stuff works, but I want to, be sure that it's for educational purposes, right? And so we're giving it with that intent. Is there a way that the schools are monitoring that is exactly what they're doing?
Yeah, that is exactly what Regent Norwood is making sure is happening, that there's a curriculum and a robust plan that accompanies the ability to provide these devices.
So it's actually tracked, that they're actually following the curriculum?
So I think that just so that we're clear, what the school district has provided us in, what we do know is that they are assigning work to students. They have packets that they're given through K-5 for them to do. They have not been, as far as I understand, grading that work per se. It has been sort of a voluntary sign-on basis, but we do recognize that there are challenges across the board. We do not want the digital divide to be a reason why children are not getting the support that they need. So access to internet, access to the appropriate device, teachers, principals, they have been preparing lessons and doing Google Classroom and other things like that. We do know that there are some challenges with voluntary basis, but it all depends on the principal, it depends on the school. And that's the reason why the commissioner and his team have been working with the school district to make sure that the things that you outline, council member, are part of the discussion. But right now there is no process by which they can force that to happen, except for to monitor. They can tell you how many people have logged in, how many times they've logged in, rather they've turned in work and that type of stuff, but they can't tell you anything else besides that.
No, I thank you. And I think that in and of itself is enough to at least see, like you said, how many are logging on to the programs that we want them to. I'd be curious to actually see what those numbers look like. Again, I think this is a wonderful thing that we're doing, and I hear you on not making that a barrier, but I would like to see, because that will help inform us for future decisions on how we can encourage higher numbers of that activity. So just curious.
Councilmember Patterson.
Okay, so two questions. So first question is, could you talk a little bit more about the food service program? Let's see, on that main sheet we had there, assistance for food establishments. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And just another clarification question: Are we giving away the Chromebooks? Are the residents going to be expected to return the Chromebooks at some point in time? Will the school district be responsible for the Chromebooks? I don't have a problem if we're giving them away. It's just nice to know what exactly are we doing. I understand we're purchasing them, but then who has the ownership of the property after that? The family or the school district or us?
So I'll tackle the first question, then turn the other one over to Danielle. This is, I won't say it's a placeholder, but this is a work in progress program that we're talking about based on trying to incentivize restaurants, number one, feeding our residents in need, and number two, being able to, gain the financial assistance that comes with that. We don't have a lot more figured out yet because we're in the early stages of figuring all that out, but that's what we're trying to do with it. So like the landlord grant, that's not going to be open tomorrow, right? We have to perfect what that is. We have to make sure that it fits within the realm of HUD regs. But the intent is to try to incentivize restaurants who can feed our residents in need, kind of compounding impact on what the food distribution effort has been to date, right? So it helps them and it helps our residents. So somehow we're going to try to figure that out.
Are we looking at potentially collaborating with a potential food banker who might be on the call to get some of that free cheese that's getting ready to show up?
I mean, honestly, we haven't gotten past what I just said. It's just that we feel like that this is definitely something that is in need. We couldn't use CDBG for the straight out food distribution effort that's been occurring because there's other sources like FEMA that cover that. But this is kind of an offshoot connection to that could help both sides of that equation.
Well, I would just add, Mike, I don't know if you were talking specifically about cheese or the metaphorical cheese, but either way, it's certainly worthy of a conversation. I mean, I'm sure many of you saw that California Governor Newsom just started using a huge pot of money specifically to have restaurants go feed mostly shut-in seniors. It's really kind of putting Meals on Wheels on steroids. I think we have an opportunity to do that here, in part because, you know, I sit on the systems integration team with Commissioner Lyman Torres, and there has been so much coordination around who needs what. We could do this very well. I don't know that $300,000 is gonna tackle it, but if there's a work group, I'd be happy to serve on it.
Okay.
Council member, to answer your second question, RCSD will administer the Chromebooks in the same manner that they do the other hardware.
So we're just going to provide the funding for the equipment and they'll take it from there.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see, I lost someone. Who was it? There was another question.
It was just Jackie and Mike. I didn't see anybody else in the
I
chat.
think that was the last one that I got the chat. Were there any additional questions on this?
I guess I will just follow up and ask again about the the folks who are doing maybe beauty and hair and stuff on the side. Is there any resource available for them? If that's how they've been making their money, they can't apply for unemployment and they can't get small business loans. So what can we do?
At this point in time, I think that, you know, for our what our legal obligation, it has to be a certified business, or person has to be licensed for us to utilize any of the city funds to support them. You know, one of the things that they could possibly do is try to go and get a DBA from the county clerk's office and certify their business and get it up and running, and then they could actually try to access something like Kiva. But when it comes down to what we can utilize, CDBG, ESG, or any of the funding that we've received from the federal government, state government, has to be a certified business or a person that is definitely in licensed to actually practice in that particular field. I do know that there were some exceptions in the unemployment law for those people that were in the service industry and were sort of off the books. And so I would have them contact unemployment, because I think that in the executive order, they did make some considerations for off the books sort of employees, but I'm not sure how they regulate that with unemployment. You would have to talk to them.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so we're clear about the timeline, and hopefully we'll be able to get it. Well, no, we will be able to get it all in.
Yes.
Thank you all for
Yes.
your work on this. I know you're on warp speed trying to make it happen, and it's critical. So I'm sure we'll do what we need to do.
Thank you.
If there are no additional questions or comments, we can adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Everybody stay safe.
You too.
So-